Have you ever wondered who died first, Adam or Eve? This question has intrigued theologians and scholars for centuries, but the answer might be more complex and profound than it seems at first glance. Today, we'll dive deep into the biblical narrative, exploring not only what happened to Adam and Eve, but also the spiritual and theological impact of their deaths on all of humanity. Stay with me until the end, because you'll discover details that could transform the way you see this famous story. To begin, we need to understand the context in which Adam and Eve were created. Their story is recorded in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. God creates Adam from the dust of the earth and places him in the Garden of Eden, a perfect place filled with beauty and abundance. Shortly after, Eve is created from Adam's rib to be his companion. Together, they live in harmony with nature and with God. In Eden, there was no sin, no pain, and no death, only divine perfection. But everything changes with their act of disobedience, and this is where humanity's drama begins. God's command was clear. Adam and Eve could eat from any tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Disobedience would bring death, not just physical death, but spiritual separation from God. Then enters the serpent, described as cunning and deceptive. It convinces Eve that eating the forbidden fruit would make her like God, knowing good and evil. Eve succumbs to the temptation and also gives the fruit to Adam, who eats it without question. This act of disobedience has immediate and catastrophic consequences. By eating the fruit, Adam and Eve realize their nakedness, symbolizing the loss of innocence. When God confronts them, each tries to justify their actions. Eve blames the serpent and Adam blames Eve. God then pronounces judgments on all involved. For Eve, the consequence is pain in childbirth and submission to her husband. For Adam, the punishment is hard labor to obtain sustenance from the now cursed ground. And for both, the greatest consequence is death, something that had not existed in God's original plan. But how and when did death occur? The Bible is clear about Adam's death, stating that he lived for 930 years before dying, Genesis 5:5. However, there's no direct record of Eve's death. This raises interesting questions. Why doesn't the Bible detail her death? Could the omission be intentional? Perhaps because the focus of the narrative is theological rather than historical or biological. Now let's reflect on the spiritual significance of their deaths. Adam and Eve's death was not just the end of their physical lives. It symbolizes the introduction of sin into the world and separation from God. The Apostle Paul describes this in Romans 5:12, saying, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, in this way death came to all people because all sinned." Adam and Eve are not just individuals. They represent all humanity, which inherited the consequences of their sin. And what about Eve? Although her death isn't directly described, her role as the mother of all the living, Genesis 3:20, is significant. Eve is not just a historical figure. She is a symbol of humanity, facing the consequences of sin, but also of hope. After all, it was through her offspring that the promised Redeemer would come, as foretold in Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman who would crush the serpent's head, a prophetic reference to Jesus Christ. But let's go further. What lessons can we learn from Adam and Eve's death? First, we understand that sin has serious consequences, not just for those who commit it, but for all creation. Second, we see God's justice and mercy. Although Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, God provided clothing for them, a demonstration of care even in the midst of punishment. Third, we realize the need for a savior. The story of Adam and Eve points to Jesus Christ, the second Adam, who came to redeem humanity and restore fellowship with God. Now, back to the original question, who died first? Based on the biblical record, it's likely that Adam died before Eve, since his death is clearly mentioned while hers is not. However, what truly matters is not the order of their deaths, but the impact their lives and decisions had on all humanity. And this is where Adam and Eve's story connects directly with ours. Just as they faced the consequences of sin, we also deal with the effects of being separated from God. But just as they received the promise of redemption, we too have access to grace and forgiveness through Christ. As we reflect on this story, we're challenged to evaluate our own lives. Are we living in obedience to God or repeating Adam and Eve's mistakes? Are we trusting in the promise of salvation given to us through Jesus? These questions go beyond curiosity about who died first and lead us to consider God's eternal purpose for our lives. Finally, I invite you to continue exploring biblical stories with us. There are so many profound truths and fascinating mysteries waiting to be discovered. Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on this topic. Until next time. time, and may God bless your journey of faith and knowledge. And as we continue reflecting on the story of Adam and Eve, it's essential to highlight something even deeper: the role of God's love and mercy throughout this narrative. Despite the gravity of their disobedience, God did not abandon Adam and Eve. He could have destroyed everything and started over, but instead he chose to provide a solution beyond human understanding. This solution is the foundation of our faith, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. In Romans 5:18-19, the Apostle Paul reminds us that just as one man brought condemnation for all, one act of righteousness brought justification for all. This act is Christ's sacrifice, which reversed the consequences of sin and opened the way for reconciliation with God. When Adam and Eve were clothed with garments made of animal skins, it was the first sign of the cost of sin. The shedding of blood was required to cover humanity. And here is the direct connection to our lives. Like Adam and Eve, we have all failed. We have all strayed from God's original plan. But the story does not end with sin or separation. It continues with redemption, hope, and an invitation to return to the Creator. The real question, then, isn't just about who died first, but about how this story continues to resonate within each of us. Every choice we make reflects the same decision Adam and Eve faced: to trust in God or to follow our own will. And the good news is that even when we fail, God's grace is always available. He calls us back into a relationship with Him, offering us a new chance through Christ. This is the essence of the gospel and the reason why Adam and Eve's story remains so relevant today. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you learn the most from Adam and Eve's story? Has anything changed your perspective on life or faith? Leave your comments below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the mysteries and lessons of the Bible together. And if this video touched your heart, share it with your friends and family so they can reflect on this powerful story too. May God bless you and your journey. Remember, no matter how many times you fall, God's love is greater and He is always ready to lift you up. See you next time, and may the peace and grace of the Lord be with you.